Hey, what is up, gamers? In today's video, I'm going to show you start to finish how to make some really cool cases just like this right here for your Game Boy and Game Boy Color games using some basic stuff that most of you probably already have. And for the things you don't have, I will provide some links for them. Now, if you're here watching this video, many of you already know what these cases are. Essentially, you are using old school cassette tape cases and you're printing your own covers to put in them. For anyone who collects retro games or game consoles, you know that Game Boy and Game Boy Color games are not the easiest things to display. The little clear cases they come in aren't super attractive. They don't really stand up very well together. And most of us just don't have the money to buy every single one of these games with its case intact. That's where a project like this really shines because it adds a new way to creatively store and show off your Game Boy and Game Boy Color game collection. Not only that, when these are completed, they look very professional and honestly look as if they came that way from the manufacturer. This is something people have been doing for many, many years now. But unfortunately, when I decided to get into it, I couldn't find any really good videos that gave you all of the detailed information that you needed from start to finish. I essentially had to go through YouTube, watching multiple videos, going through Reddit posts, and picking up information here and there, and figuring out some of it on my own through simple trial and error. Whether you're a gaming enthusiast or simply love DIY projects, creating custom Game Boy cases using printed covers and cassette cases is a fun and rewarding activity. Not only does it provide a unique way to store your Game Boy cartridges, but it also allows for personal expression and creativity. In this guide, we will walk you through the steps to craft your own Game Boy cases, ensuring your collections are both stylish and organized. All right, first and foremost, you will need empty cassette tape cases. You're also going to need a color printer, paper or cardstock to print on, and a few tools that I personally like to use: scissors, razor blade, or a paper cutter, which is personally what I recommend. A ruler can come in handy, and something useful that I found but is not necessarily needed is a scoring board. It will help you fold your covers a little bit easier when you're inserting them into your cassette tape cases. Now, as far as paper, you can print these on photo paper, cardstock, or any type of glossy paper. My preference is glossy brochure paper. It's a heavier weight without being too heavy and gives a nice glossy finish that looks great inside the cases. It's also very similar to what music cassette tape cases actually had for their covers back in the day. Any items that I use within this video will be linked down in my video description. Also, any templates for Photoshop that I use in the video will also have links down there. That way you can download the templates that I use to make printing these covers just a little bit easier. Keep in mind, my templates are made in Photoshop, so I can only guarantee that they will work in Photoshop. With that said, let's jump on the computer and start making some covers.
All right, before I get into the making of these covers in Photoshop, let you know where I get my covers. The website is thecoverproject.net, and it will be linked down in the description below. This website will have a high number of Game Boy and Game Boy Color games with pre-made cassette covers for them. Now, it's not going to have all of them, unfortunately. You can still do some Google searches and find some other covers that are not on this site, but there are still quite a few games that I've had to make my own covers for. So if there's a certain game that you have and there's not a cover on the cover project, you can request it or just make it yourself. All right, guys, I've already got Photoshop open and I've already opened my 4-up template that I created for printing these Game Boy cassette covers. And I also have a 2-up template, which I will provide links to both of down in the description. The 4-up is really good if you need to print, quite a few of them at one time, obviously. 2-up I made for when I only want to print just 2 covers at once. And yes, technically you can do that on this page, but then your printer's also going to print unnecessarily the 2 other Game Boy templates that are on here. So the 2-up just works better if you only need 1 or 2 at a time. Now, something to keep in mind is I designed these on Photoshop. They are in .psd format, so I don't know what other software they're going to work in if you download something like GIMP. I don't know if those import because I've never used GIMP. I do know these will work perfectly in Photoshop. Now, these layers are also locked. You can unlock them if you have a need to. I wouldn't recommend it because I have these set in place for a specific reason and locked for a specific reason. That way you always have a template to go back to. Essentially what we are going to do is pull in the cassette tape covers that we have picked up online into this template, and then we're going to match them up to each box. So right here, we're going to pull up some Pokemon case covers that I have that I'm going to print out. And what I'm going to do is we want to do today probably gold, silver, the green, and maybe the red. And I am going to drag these all into Photoshop. Now I like to drag these up into their own images instead of dropping directly onto the template because it can get a little cluttered and I prefer to work with them one at a time. So I am going to drag them up to the top here and it's going to open all of them. So the first one we are going to start with is the red version. So I'm going to select all, I'm going to Control-C to copy. We're going to go over to the 4-up template and we're going to paste it. The first thing you notice is that it's too big. Now, a lot of you are just going to want to immediately go into the transform tool and fit it over here, which I don't recommend because I am going to give you very specific measurements for these to get it right every single time. So what you're going to want to do is select this cover. You're going to go over here to the right-hand side into the transform window where you have measurements. And for width, you're going to put 4.06 for the width. And for the height, we're going to do 4.00. This will make it the correct size of these background templates. Now, the great thing with Photoshop, and one of the reasons I'm doing this way, is now you can essentially move this over and it's going to snap directly on top of the template guide that I already have laid out here. So it's going to take the guesswork out of getting this directly where it needs to be. So from there, since we already have one done, we're going to go over to our gold version. Same thing. I'm going to copy it over to my main template again, and we're going to change this 4.06, 4.00. In terms of resizing these, there may be a faster way to do this that I just haven't found out other than manually entering these numbers every single time. I don't know if there's a way to take an image and make it completely snap to a lower level layer. I know that you can expand it to maximize the entire canvas. I don't know if it's possible to do it for an entire layer. So this is why I do it this way. It takes me 10 seconds to do it and I can pull it right over here to one of these boxes. So let's see what's next. We're going to do silver, same thing, 4.06, 4.00. And as I said earlier in the video, the main reason I keep reiterating these measurements is when I was deciding to start printing these covers by myself, I had to go through a lot of different message boards, Reddit discussions, as well as YouTube videos. And while they all had great information, none of them really had very specific details, at least not all together in one video. Some of the templates that I found were dated and old, and they weren't the best templates. That's why I decided to create my own templates for this. That way I can make one video that has some of the best details from all of the other videos. All right, now we're going to do green. All right, and that's it. We have them all set up for printing. Now I'm using just a standard HP photo printer. I am using 8.5 by 11 double-sided glossy brochure paper, which I got on Amazon. And I will include a link to that in the description. That way you can find it, but you can get this brochure paper anywhere. I just found that the most cost-efficient version of this paper I was able to get on Amazon at an extremely reasonable price. So when we go down to print, and we're going to pull this up right here, there's a few settings that I like to check, and your settings are going to be different based on your printer. I want to make sure that my scale is 8.5 by 11. You do not want to hit scale media to fit. This can absolutely throw off your dimensions. You're not going to mess with very much in here. We're also going to make sure that the layout is landscape. Now, the next thing we want to do is go into print settings. This will pull up the print settings of your printer and give you a bit more detailed printing settings, which is what we're going to see right here. And here I leave borderless on, at least for this, because we're not printing to the border. It's not going to make it or break it. I pick HP glossy brochure or professional paper because it doesn't give me another option. Even though I'm not using HP brochure paper, this tends to work perfectly fine. We want to set print quality for best. Paper, again, letter, main page, brochure paper, best quality. These are my other layout settings, and then advanced, I pick print and max DPI. It's going to print the absolute best. All right, and from there, I just print. Generally, once I print these, I will let them sit for about 10 minutes. That way that ink can completely dry and set into your paper before we move on to the cut phase. All right, this is the paper cutter that I prefer. It is from a brand called Fiskars. I will put the exact model below, and I will tell you guys in a few minutes why I prefer this. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I have a 4-up template and a 2-up template. And here I am going to use a 2-up template and show you guys how I use my paper cutter to cut these out so that they fit the cassette tape cases properly. Now, the reason that I picked this specific paper cutter is for the canal that I am pointing at right here. What this allows is when you flip the plastic guide piece over, you can actually see the exact line that the blade is going to travel, which is going to let you line your template up much easier in order to get a clean cut. Now, something you will notice in the template itself is that there's a black outline. You want to cut right on the inside of the outline and not the outside. If you cut on the outside of the outline, it will be slightly too large for your case. And once you line it up, you just want to cut it like so. And it cuts pretty easily. You're going to have a nice, perfect line every time because this paper cutter will allow you to set it up the right way the first time, every time. I'm going to fast forward through the cutting of all of the paper because you guys get the idea at this point. You just want to line everything up and cut it within the black line. Now, I like cutting these in half, usually before I do my first cut. That way I'm not fighting the entire paper. And the same thing if I'm doing my 4-up, I will try to cut them into 4s. That way I have 4 smaller sections to work with. And when we're done, as you see, you get a nice clean case cover with all the right cuts. All right, now this next step is completely optional. What I'm using here is a scoring board or a crease board, and it's going to help you score the lines that you need to do your folds on for putting these in the cassette tape cases. And it's going to make it a lot easier than trying to manually fold these yourself. You can get one of these scoring boards for under $15, and I can leave a link to one down in the description below, but it is not a requirement. All right, and this is going to be your final step. Just take your folded cover, put it inside the front of your case, and then put your case back together. And here you are. You have a nice case for your Game Boy games.
All right, guys, if you've made it this far, you should have all the information you need for making these super cool cases for your Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. I absolutely fell in love with these cases the first time I saw them, and there's a few places around the internet where you can buy these, Etsy specifically, but being the DIYer I am, I like making this stuff myself. All right, if you like this video or found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up as it's going to help this video and the channel greatly. If you want to see more content like this on retro style gaming, please let me know down in the comments section below. And with that being said, until next time.